So I'm going to kind of take the lead, or at least start. Maybe that's the better way to phrase this. I had mixed feelings, and I had to watch this episode a couple of times to kind of work through what my thoughts were. Initially, I thought I have seen stronger episodes even in the last 9 series arc. So in many ways, at least early on, I wouldn't say disappointed, but it was close to disappointment. The way things evolved, it seemed to be way too quickly for me, and it could have been extended out a little bit more. I'm either disappointed in myself or realize that my roots are very different than you guys in thinking that all of the shapeshifters they need to be wiped out off the face of the galaxy. They have no social redeeming value. When they slaughtered 800 million Cardassians, just really, these beings have no redeeming value. I'm glad we're close to getting rid of them, although I knew what happened. So that would probably take to think bloodthirsty, but hey, I'm an American and a Texan. We're the ones that dropped the bomb. So I do have that cultural heritage in my background. They had to get through some sappy parts, and we did get through that. I'm not quite sure how I ended up feeling about the bromance of Chief and Bashir. I've certainly had close male friends before, but I never had a brother, so that whole thing kind of befuddled me. Of course, Garak, for me, is and was the star, and he is and was the star of this episode. And to see his evolution and to see the evolution of Cardassia through him, I thought was really interesting. But the character that I thought stayed the same the most throughout, and it was exemplified throughout this final episode, was Quark. Still thinking about the bar. Profits are down. War is bad for profits. Profits good, war bad. Not for any other particular reason. But if I go through the episode chronologically, the first scenes of getting ready with O'Brien and Keiko, and then Ezri and Bashir, I wondered, this is not just going out on a space flight. This is not going out on a mission. This is going out where you have a 50% chance of not coming back, period. And you rarely get to see that sort of goodbye. And what does that do to people and couples? Then we move to Cardassia, and that's when the founder and the Breen, the founder once again shows her duplicity by offering the Breen Earth after having promised it to Wayun. Also, when Garak and Damar are caught on the street and Kira shows up as the Breen, she is a cold-blooded killer. She may have evolved a little bit, but she's got some DNA from her resistance days or the occupation days that she can draw upon to do things that other people might not be able to. Quark and Vic, I'm going to leave that one to you, Megan, for the card game, because I knew you were loving that. When the power gets cut, obviously the game's on, but Mila's killed. And for some reason, I remembered the tumble down the stairs, but I didn't remember Garak's reaction. And Andy Robinson's just a great actor, and that scene was very poignant to me. Then the founder orders the massacre of all Cardassian civilians. There's the final battle, and the good guys win. And then really the last scene that I found the most meaning in was when Martok, Ross, and Sisko were sharing a glass of blood wine on Cardassia. And for Martok, this was a great victory. This was everything he had ever lived for. This was the culmination of his life as a Klingon, and literally while standing on the bodies of his enemies, or in this case, massacred Cardassians. And Sisko, he didn't reflect on the cost. He wouldn't even celebrate with him. And when they both dumped the wine out, I thought that was a pretty poignant scene as well. And I guess maybe there was one other, when after Sisko goes into the fire caves and Major Kira is promoted to the head of Deep Space Nine, and she orders Nog to check him on shipping manifest. I thought that was perfect because that's exactly what a commander would do, give a pointless, meaningless order to an officer to go execute. And Nog saying, yes, sir. Aye, aye, sir. And going off. And then her picking up the baseball and tossing it. That's back to the first episode. So that's kind of where I shook out. Some of the vignettes I loved. Obviously, some of the characters I still love. As I watched it in viewings 2 and 3, I dropped my disappointment because I was so focusing on the individual characters. So that became more important to me. This was not Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the Dominion War. This was Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And it ended, I think, as it should have, not as a great victory, but as we won. What are you going to do tomorrow? You're going to check on shipping manifest of our ships attached to Deep Space Nine. So that's kind of my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I had mixed feelings about this whole episode. There were a lot I really liked. It's a wrap up. They had to kind of tie up all of the plots, and I appreciate that they tied up everything. And I thought I really enjoyed the end of the Dominion War parts of it. I wasn't so big on the wrapping up of the Paul Wraiths storyline. I thought it was kind of lackluster, kind of a little confusing. I thought the end of Sisko, although mirrored nicely, like his sacrifice with Odo's sacrifice to end the Dominion War, very confusing. It seemed out of character for him to so easily abandon his pregnant wife. That hit me as very odd and out of character. I loved all of, as Tom, the character moments from all of it. I love Julian and O'Brien, and I love Julian and Garak. He has more chemistry with each of those guys than he will ever have with Esri Dax. That's just the way it goes. And I maybe he just brings out really good things in other men. Maybe that's what Julian's nature is fundamentally. So I love those. The death of Damar was a really, I think for me, a big touching moment. What you pointed out, Tom, about when Mila was back on the stairs, that I felt was what pushed Garak right over the edge to realizing that he's never going to see the Cardassia he wants or he remembers because of just the catastrophic loss. And I think his reckoning with that was painful to watch. That was a broken man. And that I found really challenging. Yeah, I thought overall really good episode. I'd love to hear what you guys thought of the Paul Wraiths ending arc specifically. Like the Kai Wynn kind of was being vaporized. Gul Dukat became the demon, ends up suffering in burning caves for the rest of time. What did you all think of that? And especially Sisko, how he was he became a prophet. I found that part of it just very unsatisfying.
It's a strange ending to the series, and I think one of the real reasons we're all feeling slightly unsettled by this episode. I had the same sort of thing. I've seen this episode probably about a dozen or more times, and I watched it twice back to back, and sort of for the first time I started watching and noticing that this is 3 separate episodes sort of mashed into one, and none of the timelines of them really sync up all that well. The first one with, got Damar and Kira and Garak living in the basement, all that stuff on Cardassia. Damar says, I had to go to a meeting. I was needed tonight. We don't really know how much time they're in that basement for. This happens a lot towards the sort of end of the series. We saw this before with how long did Bajor and Dukat and Kai Wynn hang out on DS9? Could have been weeks. They sort of do these big lapses while other scenes are happening in the immediate. And it makes for a kind of fractured watch. We start the fire cave stuff, like, almost at the beginning of the episode. They're not in the fire caves for 3 days. They go there, and that entire scene is, I don't know, a couple hours. They wander through the caves, they have the ritual. She kills Dukat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then Sisko goes back there. That's 3 hours plus change because he's got to fly there and wander through. But we think it takes place when they leave for Cardassia, and it absolutely does not. So we're sort of seeing everything in this disjointed way, and then one story progressively is better than the others. Without a doubt, the destruction and liberation of Cardassia is the gem in the ending. That's the pathos that we've been wanting to see since the beginning. Everybody wants to see that sort of, of course, you have become the conquered and the martyrs the way you left Bajor. Everybody. That cascading shot at the end where they're trailing across the destroyed Cardassian landscape is virtually identical to the one in Emissary, where you see he goes to meet Kaiopaka and it's just Bajor just in ruins. It's that same idea. But it's three different stories. You've got the relatively unsatisfying staff conclusions in the battle stuff, and then you've got the Sisko becoming a prophet, which, I mean, yeah, I'm not crazy about it either, but where else were they going to go with it? Like, he can't just go back to working on the station. What's he going to do?
Shipping manifests.
He can't. He basically led the war. If he does go back, Starfleet's going to put him, they're going to put him on Earth. He's going to end up either teaching like O'Brien or having some sort of high up position. Yeah, he's got to go somewhere, so he goes and hangs out with his mom. I don't know. He's got stuff to do.
So, in that scene, I couldn't determine, has he been elevated to true godhood? Is he half human, half god, like Hercules or some other Greek hero from antiquity? I was trying to think of a Greek hero who is half human who got elevated to Olympus, and I couldn't think of one. Any thoughts on, was he elevated? Is he still human? Is it something different?
I think he's human-ish. I think in the beginning of the series, and this is just my own personal theory that I've said several times, I think at the beginning of the series, Sisko is human. But he meets the prophets and he sort of, like I said, sets up his own timeline, and Sarah becomes his mother. The question is, was Sarah always his mother, or was that temporal mechanics gone awry and he sort of created his own timeline because of it? But I think he's humanish. There's definitely a human component to him. He has offspring. Jake is human. Jake's not a prophet, right? But I would say he's sort of demigodish, or at least he's been put in a position where he's made into a quasi-immortal being because he has stuff to do.
I almost kind of saw it like he's almost like the prophet's version of a Wayun, just in that, or of a Vorta. Because
Ouch!
Well,
Ouch!
no, because they needed someone solid who could go into space-time and do all of their prophet errands, and that's why they plucked him up into this strange godlike. Yeah, so they've made a demi-prophet who can interact with the world, so then they can have him go do all of the things that they can't do, but they need done to maintain the timeline in their non-linear fashion. Yeah, I think they just constructed him as a matter of expediency.
Now, the question is, before he meets them, did he introduce them to the concept of time and of sentience and of Bajor and stuff like that? Does everything that happened on Bajor in the past happen as a result of their meeting Sisko? We know that the prophets are they left Bahala and they went into the Celestial Temple, supposedly. But did they go to Bajor from the Celestial Temple and leave? Did Sisko set up everything with Bajor? Probably not, but it's an interesting idea if he introduced them to this concept of game and of time and of things not being linear. And he admits himself, his life isn't linear. It's literally all over the place. It's very weird, and I think it's left purposely ambiguous because otherwise we'd be scratching our heads over this forever.
Yeah, I'd have less of an issue with it if he wasn't, like, currently progeniting in a linear fashion with an actual human woman.
Yeah.
What about the evolution of the founder after she links with Odo?
It was a cool moment.
Is there some much deeper meaning there that we could possibly tease out? Or is it just a convenient, very convenient TV/movie technique to say, oh, I just realized that my massacre of the Alpha Quadrant was wrong. Let me go stand trial for it.
I think
was there really something, some redeeming something in that, or was that just a science fiction trope?
I don't know if it was redeeming, but I thought it was really in line with her character and her priorities, because she's always been really clear about the fact that any one changeling is worth more than anything else. And by doing this, she got Odo to go back to the Great Link. And I think that was more important than anything that was happening in the Alpha Quadrant, was getting Odo to go home. And so I think that understanding that they had, I think it was a negotiation where he said, I know this is what you really want, so I will give it to you if you stop everything that's going on here. And the rest of the things, they'll be healed, which is its own morally gray thing. But yeah, I think it was in line with what she wanted all along, which was Odo to come back.
You're exactly right. That point early in the series where Wei-Yun's, you're doing remarkable progress with Odo, and she's like, bringing Odo back to the link means more to us than the entire Alpha Quadrant. And Wei-Yun has this look on his face. I don't understand what that means. But yeah, I think it's in that single moment where they link, she has to make a decision between extinction and the desire for order, and she chooses not to have her people go extinct because order can wait for another day. Her people can't. So I think that's, yeah. And I think you're exactly right. I think bringing Odo back and having Odo do that is crucial to Odo regaining his acceptance into the link after he had been cast out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know where she ends up. They said they put her on trial, but, you know, we don't get to see that part of it, so be very curious to know.
Probably not good things, given the Federation's track record with changelings.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to see how that would end up.
Yeah, we don't do well with them.
No.
Is my final interpretation of the end of this series was that the war's over. Obviously, that's a very big, important deal. We don't have to see people with PTSD or broken bodies hobbling around DS9 on one leg or one arm. But life goes on, and life in a federation goes on, and administration goes on, and counting ships manifest goes on. Selling drinks to people goes on.
Yeah.
All of that goes on. And is that realistic that life just goes on after this, or was that a realistic portrayal of that?
I think it was, because that's how it always happens, right?
Yeah.
Is the horrible things happen. The people who are left pick up and rebuild and continue and keep doing what they were doing. I think I like the moment the moment where that was expressed for me was when they were all in Vix. And this was the Vix moment that really got to me even more than the card game time. It was when they're talking about where Keiko and Miles are going to live on Earth. And they're talking about the cities that they love and have a good time. I just adore Minsk. Gotta live in Minsk. Minsk. I looked it up. Beautiful city. To buy the pictures. But
Wow.
Yeah, but like they had won the war, and there was still, of course, the Paul Ray's plot to conclude. But at that point, the war was over, and they're all kind of thinking about the next steps and realizing that the next steps are going to be in different places, and that hurts and it's difficult, but it's kind of what's got to happen.
Yeah,
and you can still joke about it a little.
Yeah, that's the end of TNG too. It ends on that note of them. They're still all on the ship, and after all good things, and Picard joins them for playing poker, and he'd never done that before, and that was a big deal. And Troy's, you're always welcome to join us. You are always welcome. And it's sort of sitting there with friends, and it's just another evening, and life goes on, and the ship keeps sailing. Which is, it gets different, I think, in Voyager, because Voyager has that climactic sort of ending where they're rushing through the transwarp, and then they come home and there's the big fireworks and the parade. And that's sort of like a hero's return. But it doesn't have that sort of spark of, this is what we do and this is another day and life goes on. Which is something I kind of...
heroes in this war.
Yeah, no, not really, just survivors. And we do a nice job. You talk about PTSD and stuff like that, and they address that really well in this season with Nog and when he lives with Vic. I think we get a lot of that sort of post sort of war trauma dealt with in the middle of the season. There's a lot of stuff about separation and relationships gets sort of hashed out. I did think they did one real disservice in that little montage where they have that music and everybody's looking at memories.
Oh, the flashbacks, yeah.
Yeah, you don't see or hear anything about Jadzia, which is criminal. I understand the reasons why, but I still think it's a bit of a disservice. Yeah. It's nice that everybody's there and having their memories, but it's a little...
I think she was in one of Worf's.
She was, eh?
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure it was all Ezri, but I could be wrong.
No, there was a leap into the arms kiss with Jadzia.
With Jadzia. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. At least,
Just one.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this is what I was saying the other day about, like, it's watching her tear up about having to leave in What Will Be Behind. It's very sad. But yes, yeah, sorry, go on.
I do have to give a shout out to Starfleet for elevating Miles to Professor of Engineering. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Obviously, he's not academically credentialed. Point number one. Point number two, he's not an officer. He's an enlisted man. And they're bringing him in to teach cadets who, upon graduation, will be senior to him as officers, engineering. As you can tell, I'm the son of a professor. So that was pretty meaningful to me. And I would have preferred the end to be at Quarks, because then we could have just said, Casablanca still lives, everybody goes to Quarks.
Yeah.
But instead, we had Jake looking for his father. I wouldn't have been looking for my father. I'd have been off finding my own adventures somewhere, or I had my nose in a book. And I worried that Jake was sitting around waiting. I understand why a wife who's going to be a mother would sit around and wait, but I think it's different for a son. I think you have to move on, and I didn't see that from him. But I just love seeing Quarf, and the Quarf Odo final scene for me was perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
So, well,
that's a thing about Jake, though, is that he's kind of stuck. We see this in that episode where he gets, his dad gets flashed into the future, and Jake just keeps waiting and losing his life in the sort of absence of his father. His father is an immense personality to live under. And Jake, for all his sort of interesting stuff, I don't know that he's a centered guy. He never has been. He sort of says he's going to go off to this writing school, and he doesn't, and he sort of works for the Federation News Service, and he doesn't. I think he's figuring out how not to live under Sisko's shadow and be his own person, but I think he's got a long way to go before that. And you sort of see that his dad's gone, Cassidy's on the station, but his father's gone, and this is where he chooses to stay, looking out the window, waiting for his dad, as opposed to getting on with his life. So, interesting to see where he would go with that. But yeah, I think he's stuck for a good while.
Yeah, but he's 19?
I think he's 19, 20. Because when he first shows up, he's 14. So he's probably in his early 20s at this point.
Yeah, so he's got a couple of years to be kind of
figure
useless. It out. There's not much you can screw up before 25. You can't fix by 30. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
You want to get out of somebody's shadow, you get in your car and leave.
That's it. Where's he going to go?
Yeah. We've got 5 minutes left. Let's give our audience 5 minutes of final thoughts. Megan?
I'm really going to miss DS9 now that we're not going to be talking about it every couple of weeks. I've really enjoyed going through this. The series has aged phenomenally well, and it's almost alarmingly relevant to things that are going on today, like the very best Trek always is. Not a perfect season. There were problems with it, and they're mostly, I think, behind the scenes, specifically referring to the issue with Terry Follows being pushed out. But it's such a good story. It's such a good Star Trek. It's board meetings about ethics in space and great battles and a little bit of interesting mysticism. So I loved all of the things that they dealt with, especially just kind of showing that conflict is almost always gray and it's never going to be easy and no one's hands are ever really clean. And I love it. And I'm sad that we're at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Murphy.
Yeah, I said it so many times. This is my favorite Trek. If I had to watch a Star Trek over and over, and I've spent my life watching Star Trek in one way or another, this is my favorite. And it's my favorite because it is definitely, writing and storyline aside, it's the most human, I think, of Star Treks in a certain way. It just evolves so well. And it starts off like, I love those first episodes. I love Emissary. And I love the sort of clunky kind of cheese of that first season and the way that they just start world building. You see them really, they take the clay in hand and they shape. And it really does a nice job. And I know that it owes a lot of factors, and there's controversy with script writing and story Bible and stuff like that, which I won't get into. But all in all, I think they do a remarkable job with it the whole way through. Season 7, definitely the weakest of the seasons, but yeah, it's so good. I would recommend it. Anybody who likes sci-fi, anybody who likes good space opera or story, or good dialogue between characters, go and watch this. My God, it's just such a gem. And it really does not deserve the sort of backseat status that it's taken in the Trek universe. We're starting to come out of it a little bit. More people are starting to find it, but it's definitely the dark horse of the whole of. And I think people should go and give it a watch.
So I'm going to build on really what you said, Murphy. This show has more aliens than any of the other Treks, but it's also the most human.
Yeah.
And I found it the most human. The ethical choices that everyone had to make, starting with Sisko all the way down literally through the last episode. I enjoyed that exploration. I found it to be great science fiction and great opera, great space opera. You're absolutely right. It is my favorite series as well. I know I'm going to miss it. Hopefully I won't miss you guys, because we'll go on to bigger and better things, or at least other things. But if you've not ever seen DS9, treat yourself to watching it straight through. You can stream it now. I even bought every season DVD when it first came out, just so I could do that. Yeah, it's great. And this last episode, I thought, was a fitting end to a great series.
Yeah, agreed.
All right.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.